All right, next up, let's style this list. So if you don't care about CSS, you just want to get onto the React stuff, you can skip this. Also, if you don't want to watch the video, you can just look at the source code and copy and paste the CSS. But in this video, I'm going to do a very quick walkthrough. I found these videos are taking quite long to do the CSS. It's like the length of like 2 or 3 React videos put together. So I'm just going to copy and paste some CSS in and narrate what it does. But first, I just want to point out the code pen that I was largely inspired by / took a lot of styles from. It's by somebody named Sausan. I'll include the link. We're going to change some of the colors and the text and the icons and the background, but I'm going to use a lot of what I found here. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm coming up with this on my own. I am not a designer. Okay, so here's what we're starting with. So there's a couple of styles that I'm going to add to the index CSS, and these are styles that are basically global styles that affect everything on our web page. So margin 0, padding 0, I'm going to set the font, and I'm also going to add a gradient. Okay, so margin padding 0, box sizing is set to border box on everything, star, and then the background of the body now has a linear gradient. These pastel colors from this pastel blue, pastel green to pastel pink, like a peachy color. Font size 1.1, REMs, font family is quicksand, and height is 100% so that the gradient goes all the way up and down the page. And also I'm pretty zoomed in, I think. There we go. So you can see the pink, green, and blue. Next, we're going to add some styles to the to-do list itself. So we need to make sure that we're adding a class name here so that we can style it easily, to-do list. And then I've made a to-do list CSS file. I've imported it just to speed the video up. And here are the first couple of selectors. So the to-do list, the box, the div that contains the entire list, has some padding on it. It has a 500 pixel max width. Here's the background color. It has a box shadow, and the box shadow is just a black with a very low opacity, 0.1. So it's just sort of a transparent box shadow. And then I'm giving all of the ULs, which there's only one, inside of the to-do list div, no list styles, so we don't get the bullet points or any sort of list styles at all, and then a margin top. So that's what we end up with. You can see the box shadow, you can see the red div that everything's inside of. Next, I'm going to add an H1 into our to-do list render. So right here, I'm going to add an H1, and let's give it just a title of like React to-do list. And then I'm going to put a span in here, and the span is going to say a simple React to-do list app, something like that. And I don't want to be redundant with React, so I'm just going to say to-do list, exclamation point, and then a simple React to-do list. And then my styles in to-do list.css look like this. We increase the font or change the font size, change the letter spacing. We add a line below the H1, a border bottom, which is just a transparent or 0.3 opacity line. And then in addition, the span gets some other alterations. Margins are changed, the font size is changed, and this is what we end up with. Okay, so that's what we're looking at so far. The next thing I'm going to do is just move my form down below the actual list of to-dos. So down there. Perfect. Okay, so now we add to-dos. This is what we're ending up with for now. We haven't styled the to-do items or the forms at all. Okay, so let's handle that. So inside of our to-do item, or just to-do.js component, I'm going to create a couple of classes. So on the div that we return with the form, I'm going to give it a class of to-do, or class name of to-do, and I'm actually going to add the same thing down here. Yeah, this is a little duplicated, but that's okay. We're just focusing on CSS for now. I'm also going to add in a class to the individual LIs, and I'm going to call it to-do task. And this is going to be kind of hacky because I'll show you in just a moment. I want it to have to-do task always and sometimes have completed if it is completed. So this is sort of a bad way of doing that, to be honest. It would be better to make this a separate object up top where we selectively add in completed. But this is all right. I don't want to change too much of the React code in case some people aren't watching the styling video and they're just focusing on the React content. I did kind of promise I wasn't going to do a lot of React. Okay, so now in our to-do CSS, which I've already included, this is the basic styles for the to-do div. So each to-do, display flex, give it some margin. The -3 REMs is so that it goes all the way over here as well. Without it, it would stop in line here. And then the background is this transparent color that you can see here. This is all Flexbox stuff, and then padding and margin. Next up, we have some styles that have to do with the completion of a to-do. So when we toggle it to be completed, we're changing the opacity. But in addition, there's this fancier stuff here that helps to animate a strike through effect. So I won't go into a ton of detail, but the way that it works is that we are animating an element that starts out on the left side and then moves to the right side. And this is the animation part down here. This is the width or the height of the line. So we could do 2 pixels. I think that's the number I settled on. The code pen I was looking at did 1 pixel. And then there's this animation strike item. And there's the keyframes for it. And we also give the to-do task itself position relative. You'll see what we end up with. Looks like this. So it animates from left to right. So that's not an actual strike through. It's not the same as setting the text decoration to be line through. This is an element that is being animated through CSS all the way across. That's what this animation is doing. It's saying to animate the width 100% plus a little on the end. You can see we're getting a little extra there. That just helps us to see the strike through effect. So I didn't write this, but this is, we're starting a little to the left and then we're ending a little bit to the right. So if we were to extend that to be 10 REMs, that's what we end up with. Quite the exaggerated strike through. Next up, let's move on to the buttons, which I used Font Awesome for. So if I go to my index.html, I'm going to include Font Awesome right here. And this is a CDN straight from their website. And then I'm going to go back to my to-do.js, and where these buttons are, instead of saying edit, there's an icon that is called FA-pen. It's like a little pen icon for edit. And then instead of the X for handle or for the remove, there's a trash icon. And then I'm actually going to wrap both of these in a class name of to-do-buttons. All right, and this is what we have so far. It's not great. So now I'm going to go to my to-do CSS again and paste in some code that has to do with the buttons. So we give them some padding left, the div for the buttons, but then each button, get rid of the border, make them a different font size, add some margin in so that they're spaced, no background, set the color to white, and it looks like this now. So those are the icons as we make new to-dos. Looks good enough, and they still work. This does not look very good when we're editing it, but we have to address that. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So that edit form is up here. I'm going to give the form itself a class name of to-do-edit form. And then go to my to-do.css. And there's quite a few styles for it. These are almost all coming from that code pen I showed you. But if we take a look, some of it has to do with Flexbox. Some of it is giving it some margin and font size for the labels, removing the border from the input, giving it a background color. Coming down, we're giving a background color to the button. And most of this is pretty straightforward stuff. There's a hover as you hover over the button, and it looks like this. As we edit one of these, there's the form, and there's a slight hover effect. I don't know if that's even going to show up. It's so slight in the video, I mean. Then we need to move on to this new to-do form component down at the bottom. So we're going to go look at the form CSS, or the form JavaScript. Where are you? To-do form. Okay. And I'm going to give the form its own class name of new to-do form, which is the same name as the component, just following that convention. I've already included a CSS file, and this is almost identical code to what we did for the to-do form, the edit form right here. If you take a look, all of this code I have highlighted has to do with the edit form. It's the only difference is we're selecting to-do edit form, and then over here, I've replaced it with new to-do form. Now what we could do is just do all forms in general. However, I like to keep my styles sort of segmented into each component, even if that means increasing the amount of duplicated code. In addition, there is a little bit that is different. I added a margin top to the new to-do form, and you can see that here we have some space versus the edit form is right in line. There's no margin on top. There is margin here, right there. But if you wanted to, you could just style all forms and do away with the classes. It just makes it harder if something is going wrong. Like if something was going wrong with this form, you're trying to figure out the styling. then you're going to be working with styles that are affecting all forms. So I like to break it out into individual classes per component, even if that means duplicating stuff. That's not always the case. Like if you're working on a large application where you have lots of forms and you need them to look the same across the application, then you could just make a single style sheet for those forms. But in this case, since I'm trying to teach sort of best practices around using class names per each component and abiding by that class name, I'm going to leave it how it is right now. Okay, so not a very comprehensive line-by-line style guide here. Please take a look at the CSS if you have any questions. Also, I just want to reiterate, a lot of this, almost all of it, came from this code pen I found. I am not a styling person, but we added the gradient, right? So we basically made it like 20 times better. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'll see you in the next section.